Hello and welcome back to the Facts of Facts, the only Facts of Life podcast that's going to try and be on its best behavior today.
Yeah, not like this show ever is.
No, why would it ever be on its best behavior?
I want so the last time we recorded the one before this, which was just about Joe's unusual relationship with an older woman that seemed consequence free, right?
I mean, Joe's pride, dignity, principles, they were going away.
They were going away, but she snapped them back like a rubber band. So that's so. However, and you said, when you were watching it, you texted me, you said, this is a weird one, but it's inoffensive. And I said, oh, well, still, that's very intriguing. I'm excited to watch this. And you said, but I cannot wait for you to watch next week's episode because it's not only weird, it's also offensive, but also it's the reason why this podcast exists.
Do you get it? Why now?
Yeah. Why don't you explain this? How did you re-see this episode recently? Or has this always been lodged in your mind as like, was that okay?
No, it's always been lodged in my mind as was that okay? But I also really hadn't thought about it that much. It's not like one of the pillars of the show for me with like the things that I remember are the iconic jokes and the relationships.
Okay.
But over time I've noticed that their plots are something else. And so I would say, I don't know, it's probably a couple of years ago at this point. I was flipping through the TV, Logo was on, and Facts of Life was airing, and it was the scene towards the end.
Oh, well, we can't get there yet because
Yes, but I will say that it was the scene where Mrs. Garrett says all of the things that are good about Leo, and then mentions the cold hard fact of Leo.
Yes.
Towards the end, and
yes.
I was like, "Oh,
yes,
my goodness."
Yeah. So a couple things. I watched this episode today while downstairs in my house while my husband Peter was working upstairs, and he usually keeps the door open so that we get air going through the house, whatever, keeps it easy breezy, but because he's actually doing work and is on conference calls and Zoom and whatever, I usually listen to music podcasts or watch the Facts of Life in my earbuds, so it's that so his coworkers don't have to hear da da da, you take the good, you take the bad. And then everyone like on his Zoom calls is like, what is happening in your house right now? How old is your wife? Is she either 70 or is she 12? Like, what's going on? So, any case, I usually just listen to it. And there's a moment when I just went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Peter, my husband, he was like, he screamed. He was like, what's going on? Are you okay? What's going on? Is there something happening? And I was like, oh, no. It was just the Facts of Life. He was like, what happens in this episode? I was like, I need to watch this whole thing and then tell you because it is so unbelievable. So now that we've buried the lead, why don't you introduce the title of this?
Sure. So today's episode is called A Different Drummer, which is about as tasteful as I think this episode gets.
Yeah, not R is for
Ricky.
And
it was directed by Azad Khalada. You could tell because there are 7 out of 9 scenes take place in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
And it was written by Facts of Life first-timers Lou and Diane Messina. The couple of Lou and Diane started off on the show House Calls and then went to Harper Valley, PTA, before transitioning into the world of Norman Lear with the Jeffersons and Archie Bunker's Place. After this, they'd go on to write an early episode in season 5. Not as memorable as this one. and then they were off to the lofty heights that is Webster. So by the late 80s, their paths had diverged. I'm not sure if it was a divorce or if they preferred writing separately. I tried to find out, but I honestly couldn't. After a stint on Knots Landing together, Lou did an episode on his own of My Secret Identity, which was a show I enjoyed. And Diane moved on to Homefront, where she was nominated for a couple of awards, including an Emmy. And then Savannah, which gay people loved. It was an early WB show. It was like, I believe, it was like Plantation Buffy based on the advertisements. I really don't know.
Okay.
There was also Early Edition with Kyle Chandler, who, so dreamy. That's
of
like,
course. How can you not love Coach Taylor?
Yeah,
oh my God. Also, the other great thing about Early Edition, as silly as it was, there's a really good cat in it.
A great cat.
The cat like basically delivered the news. The cat was like, yeah. Like, I don't deliver the regular newspaper like dogs do. I deliver tomorrow's newspaper. So go save some lives, Coach Taylor.
She also did That's Life, Judging Amy's Strong Medicine, The Young and the Restless, and finally Army Wives. And then she took an 8-year break, but emerged 2 years ago as Diane Messina Stanley. And that's not all. Not just a new last name. She's also got a new writing partner in James Stanley. Looks like somebody likes to write with her husband. Better watch out, James. In a couple of years, you're going to find yourself solo writing on My Secret Identity, and then poof, you're gone.
Yeah. And then, what's this woman's name again?
Diane Messina Stanley.
Then it's going to be Diane Messina Stanley Lundborg.
Oh.
Come after me.
Good plot twist. So let's get started.
Yes.
We open on the moon. It was really crazy.
It was crazy.
Anti-gravity effects. Everybody had these expensive moon suits. Mrs. Garrett's hair was just floating around in space.
Yeah, Mrs. Garrett's hair always looks like that. Doesn't matter if it's in space or not.
That's not true. In Paris,
it's always levitating.
In Paris, it's very different.
That's true. As I said, it looked simultaneously dry and wet all the time.
Yes. And so let's see. Mrs. Garrett is pacing frantically, looking at her watch. Very weirdly, apparently, she's one of those inside of her wrist watch people.
So, I will say this: as the daughter of two people who were professors. My mom was an English professor at one point in her life, and not only is she right-handed. So she would write on the board with her right hand. Obviously, she wasn't being like, I'm going to challenge myself and see if this is legible for my students. But so people who were right-handed typically wear their watches on their left hand because it's so you don't constantly are bumping your hand while you're writing with your watch. But so she always wore her watch on the inside of her right hand so that she could very quickly look at the time to see what time it was while she was teaching. So
clever.
Maybe Mrs. Garrett's one of those people. She's teaching her cooking diet classes or whatever.
Well, regardless, if your mom did it really subtly so people couldn't notice, Mrs. Garrett's like,
yes,
it's just
that's
like
true.
wiggling her.
Very much like I'm an inside watch type gal. Yeah.
Yeah, she was really wiggling around there. So Tootie explains that they're waiting on Roy, who she calls Roar, and that's the first line of the episode. Azad, you just started. And she said Roar, not Roy. And start again.
And she also says something so unbelievably vague that unless you actually know who Roy is, you kind of don't know what the hell's going on. She goes, where is Roar with all that stuff we want from the bakery?
Apparently, Roar missed lunch and breakfast.
Yeah.
Which Joe explains to two people who are already aware of this fact.
Yeah.
Making a joke about him going to the Triple Crown because, you know, kids love horse racing jokes.
Well, so there's another horse race. There's another horse joke later in this episode. And I was like, uh-oh. Like, is this going to be a runner? Is this going to be like horse jokes?
Did Spectacular Bid write this episode? Is Spectacular Bid Diane Messina's husband?
Exactly. Anyway, and so
it was
also a non-joke. Like it was one of those typical non-jokes of Facts of Life where the audience was like, "Is that a joke? Should we laugh?" She said it like it was a joke, so chuckle. Like, because it's like if you win the Triple Crown, that means you've won. You haven't not shown up for 2 other races.
True. Doesn't it feel really, really weird talking about anything but what this episode's about right now?
Yes, it does.
It's like, yeah, I got some minutia for the first 4 minutes, but
Yeah.
Anyway, so Mrs. Garrett frantically tells the girls to calm down, explaining that she plans on stuffing Roar with the bread and then roasting him.
Roast. Now, girls, calm down. He'll get here. And when he does, I'm going to take his bread and stuff it with him and roast him over a...
Calm down, Mrs.
Like,
J.
Natalie's like, whoa, you need... What diet pills are you on, Mrs. Garrett? Jesus, you need to take it down a notch.
Yeah, also, we know that the Mrs. Garrett has a car, and this bakery can't be that far. Rather than have the girls go hungry for breakfast and lunch, just hop in the car, drive down there, and be like, hey, what's up with my bread?
Not only that, but also, as someone who has been quarantine baking, as someone like yourself who has been a recipient of some of my beautiful sourdough bread,
Yes.
It's not that hard to bake very simple bread.
And for a school of like 200, maybe. Okay, if you needed to have it for lunchtime.
But also, the biggest laugh that this first scene gets comes from Natalie about the sandwiches that they make, right? And if any normal person who needs to feed a large group of school children knows to use what ingredients you have, not just force your hand onto peanut butter and jelly sandwiches wrapped in lettuce. If you only have lettuce, then just make tuna salad sandwiches, chicken salad sandwiches. Make these little girls eat a salad. Why do we need sandwiches?
I agree with you. I feel like there's so many breadless lunches that they could have made. I did do a Google search for peanut butter and jelly lettuce wraps, and there's not much. However, there's a story on Reddit about a guy who was high as fuck and decided to make one for himself because he was low carb. He followed it up with a glass of chocolate milk, and by the end of the story was horrified to find out that peanut butter has carbs in it, no mention of the jelly or the chocolate milk. It's a good story worth checking out, so search Reddit for I ate a peanut butter and jelly lettuce wrap high on Reddit, and you'll find it. Anyway,
But anyway, so Natalie's like, yeah, you need to chill out, Mrs. Garrett, because Mrs. Shit's getting real. You are acting like a crazy person. And Natalie's like, Jesus, chill out. I didn't know that you had like a violent streak. And Mrs. Garrett's like, neither did I until Roy. And then I literally wrote down in my notebook, hard same, Mrs. Garrett, hard same.
I knew about that about you. So Roy enters looking freshly froed.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got poofed up really good. What the hell's her name? Mrs. from season 1, she left.
Mahoney.
Mahoney. How did that escape my head? I texted you without having to research her name.
I know.
I was like, you got the Mahoney.
Slim Body. Slim Bodykins?
Mrs. Slim Body. That is all I see when I see her. But yeah, so he looks like Miss Mahoney styled his hair, and it's great. He shouts to somebody named Leo off camera about how sweet and friendly these customers are, and cue Joe, Tootie, Natalie, and Mrs. Garrett swarming him with angry faces. Tries to pretend it's still the morning, gaslighting these girls, which is totally immediately fact-checked by Mrs. Garrett.
Yeah, but also that's typical Roy. He is always gaslighting. He's like, hey, baby, you're my Josie, my little posy, la la la. I want to lick it on your clitty. Like, he's just disgusting. And then like she's like, get away from me, I hate you. And he's like, oh, don't play so hard to get. It's just, like that's the problem, is that they're always normalizing the sexual abuse.
I mean, they're saying no to it.
Yeah, but still, it's making it appear as though he's flirting. Mrs. Garrett herself normalizes it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Roy,
Yeah,
that's a
with
fact of
Roy.
life.
That is not a fact of life. To have your old lady, the woman who's supposed to be looking after you, being like, oh, he's just, the boys will be boys. No, she should be like, Roy, get the fuck out of here. She said, no, get out. You were late with the bread. Leave.
I just meant that lascivious men are a fact of life,
Yes,
not old ladies
this is literally the
apologizing
conversation.
for
This is
lascivious
literally
men.
the conversation we have every single week when Roy is here, and you're like, "This is just a fact of life, Britt. This is just a fact of life." And I'm like, "I know that, but still, this was on in 1982, so this sort of flirtatious, quote unquote, behavior was normalizing it, so that Joe kind of always had to fight off these guys. And it's like, well, if you're not going to learn that lesson now, young lady, well, then you're not going to be hardened for the real world. And it's like, do I really need to be hardened for the real world?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
going to be guys. They're going
yeah.
to be awful.
Mm-hmm.
And you should treat them like Joe treats Roy.
Yeah, don't tailgate me.
um, anyway, so he tries to pretend it's the morning, and then he tells Leo to step on it because these girls get ugly when their tarts are tardy. I assume is foreshadowing.
Me too. I was like, oh no. Oh no.
We should also mention that Leo's face is obscured by a tower of boxes of tarts, presumably. That's what they were waiting for their tart sandwiches.
Yeah, tarts.
Um,
Yeah, bread, whatever. Yeah.
and this is because he's going to be revealed as being mind-blowingly attractive.
Yeah.
Roar admits he's a little later than usual, calling Joe my pet.
Yes.
And then everyone piles on. Joe calls him my nerd. And then the rest of them talk about the debacle of the breadless lunch, the peanut butter and jelly lettuce wraps.
Yeah.
But Roar explains he's got a good excuse for his tardiness.
Yeah.
It's
He's
his new
training
assistant.
a part-time assistant, Leo.
Yes. And then he removes the top box from Leo's stack, and Leo reveals his beautiful, beautiful face. And Natoots have no chill.
Yeah. They as I've made this point in the past on this show. It's like they literally look at him like a Looney Tunes, like awooga, like it's this insane, like lascivious, like ooh, it's like this Pepe Le Pew chasing after that little kitten, and then they're both like.
They literally walk up to him to admire him up close.
I know. And he's like he
Bizarre.
takes the box away, and Roy takes the box away, and Leo goes, hi. And they're like, oh, I need a break. I need a fan. I need a chaise longue. I need a fainting couch. This is too much. He's too beautiful. That blue turtleneck and blue plaid shirt are just making me cream my jeans.
They don't really know how to dress men on this show. They don't know how to dress anybody on this show.
No.
But I'm absolutely used to the one outfit they put all these girls in. So it's really just when men come, you're like Roy's jacket that says ROY, and the letters are super spaced out in all caps. It's just like everything looks like slightly wrong.
Yeah, but also the other thing that's slightly wrong is that, like you said, that. So here's the thing: they get the girls' school uniforms completely correct. Like those look good. Those look fine on them. Those don't look gross or bad or whatever. And Joe has her tie a little bit undone, and Blair looks like a fashion plate, whatever. But then later, when they're in their like civvies waiting up for Blair, they're all in crazy clothes. Like they look as though like they dressed from like a dumpster.
It looks like honestly different variations on what my grandma would wear based on the level of event. Like if it's just like, oh, we're just hanging out at the house, it's gonna be like Tootie's all purple sweatshirt thing.
Yes.
But yeah, no, not great looks. Although better than Joe's doily sex outfit from last week. Doily sex linebacker.
That was a low point. That was a true costume low point.
So Roar explains that Leo is a little slow, but Natalie doesn't mind when he comes, just as long as it's all over her face.
Yeah. And Tootie's like, yeah, that's perfectly good. I want to just see it. He doesn't need to come on me. I just want to see him come at all.
Yes. And Mrs. Garrett asks for help getting her supper ready. But the girls are so drawn to Leo the way my cat is drawn to a laser pointer. Like he moves across the room and their heads follow him.
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Garrett's is like, Joe, I know you don't like dick. Could you help?
Yeah.
So she's got to do all the work because the girls appear ready to try out some of the techniques they learned from their brief visits to the Bates campus.
Yeah.
They're going to sexually assault this dude. And that's what this episode's about.
Yeah.
If
no.
only.
Yeah. Anyway, so then
Leo is very tall.
He is. He is very tall.
Seems like extremely tall. Let's talk about him for a second.
Okay.
So he's played by Tom Bird.
Okay.
And despite having 33 acting credits, he's one of those people that has a bunch of acting credits and no IMDb picture. So that should tell you a little bit about his career. His first gig was a Laverne and Shirley. He did a Quincy. He did a Gimme a Break. Did Fantasy Island, Alice, Family Ties, St. Elsewhere. He was in the Twilight Zone movie. He got the lead role on the TV show Boone about a guy named Boone who wants to be a country music star. Presumably named Boone, I assume, yes. He's also done Newhart, Murder, She Wrote. He was in the movie Out Cold. He was in Alien Nation, Young Guns 2, Unhappily Ever After. He closed out his career in 2000 with 2 episodes of Frasier. He always kind of had decent credits, but it just never happened to him or for him, either way. He'll always be known for not just this episode of Facts of Life, but that's right. He will return as a completely different character who has a major cocaine addiction and is a abusive boyfriend to Blair.
Wow. That is a left turn that I did not see happening.
Yes. So I remember watching the cocaine episode and going, is that Leo? And being so excited when I made the connection. So Leo, who we're about to discuss, and later Nick, the cokehead, is I think he was either sleeping with somebody in casting or somebody in casting wanted to sleep with him.
No shit. So they gave him this amazing role, which, would be, if I was in this and this was the job that I did, I would put this at the top of my reel.
I will tell you that after he did this, that was when he got that lead in the sitcom Boone. So
this was a boon for him.
Yeah. So this probably, I'm surprised he didn't get nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah.
All right. So yes.
So let's keep it moving. So here's the thing. This starts out as like basically being a thing about like an episode being, which is typical of Facts of Life, because it's like they're like a very shitty magician. They're trying to like distract you with something over here, being like, oh, this is just going to be about Roy and the bread and how bad he is at his job. And then it's like
nobody thought that.
Well, no, because but of course we're going to waste 5 to 8 minutes on that shit rather than get into what we're actually here for.
Well, I feel like they could only drop the R-bomb so many times in a script. And so they probably were like, can we just have some buffer, like a little runway in the beginning where we don't have to say it at all?
Oh, really? You thought that they had a limit? This seemed to have no limit. So in comes Blair, who's carrying 8 books. And she's like, got to get to the library. All these books are overdue. And Roy, being a lascivious piece of shit, is like, hey, little lady, let me help you there. Your arms are so weak. You don't know how to do things. I'm surprised you can read. And she's like, get the fuck away from me, you chauvinist pig. I love carrying books. I have strong arms. And then as soon as
he's also like, that's a real heavy load.
Yeah, he does say that's a real heavy load and you shouldn't be carrying that.
Yes, I just wanted to get the phrase heavy load out.
Thank you. Anyway, then, so she turns around, she's like, fuck you, get the hell away from me, stop discussing your load around me. And she turns right into face Leo, who, standing there in his unbelievably beautiful, fetching blue turtleneck, is unbearably handsome. And Blair immediately comes. So she's just like, help. I can't
Her
hear it.
words were, "These books have just exhausted me."
Yeah. And he's like, and she's like, can you help? And so she puts the books down and then she demands that she be introduced to Leo. Natalie obliges. Blair, Leo, Leo, Blair.
Leo's not my type, but they really want me to think that he's attractive.
Yeah.
But I think it could be that he's the only man that's been on set this year is Leo, besides Roy and Mr. Parker. And so I guess he wins out of that group of three.
Sure. I mean, so then he says hi to Blair once he's introduced. And then Blair's like, I love the strong silent type. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? And she's like, hey, can you take these books with me? Let's walk. Let's
Well,
have
hang
a walk.
on. Hang on. First of all, I will say props to Joe, who seems to be the only one not in love with this guy upon sight.
Well, we know why.
Because she's been getting laid every Saturday night in front of the light of a Lawrence Welk rerun?
No, because of David.
Oh, I was pretty sure it was because of her new girlfriend, but whatever.
No, it's about her long distance relationship with her French boyfriend who works in the bookshop.
Sure. And then Tootie aggressively tries to cock block Blair.
Yeah.
By being like, oh, I can help with your heavy load. And she's like, no. And like pulls the books away from Tootie. And Tootie looks pissed her plan didn't work, but also looks like she had a plan. Like she was trying to cock block.
Yes, she was, because she's a sociopath.
And Leo is curiously completely unaware that three girls are trying to fuck him right in front of his eyes with the subtlety of an elephant.
Yeah, but I will say this: that like, if this is that at least for Manzad Khalad is directing, they're mostly like he's not even in frame most of the time. It's like this is like three little girls being like, "No, I want to take the books. No, let him take the books. I want the books. No, let him stay with me and braid my hair." It's like they're just sort of like nattering along with one another. And so then finally Blair's just like, "No, I want to go. He'll take the books."
But even
and
then,
he's
before
like, what do
that,
you want me to do?
and I want to talk about this. She makes Natalie introduce her.
Yeah.
She could have been like, "Hi, I'm Blair."
No.
But she was like, "No, Natalie, introduce us."
No, she says, please introduce me, because that's polite society, Dominic.
It was jarring to me.
You can't just go up to someone in 1982 and be like, hi, I'm Dominic.
You've already, all right, sure.
Absolutely not. Blair, for sure. That's why it was so humiliating for Natalie.
Blair has to comment on the powerfulness of the name Leo, which I guess it's short. It evokes visions of lions, so it seems pretty powerful.
Or Leonardo da Vinci.
No, I get lions. But that's just me.
Okay.
Blair hates to sound like a silly little female.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a thing that people say all the time. I hate to sound like a silly little female.
Yeah.
But she could really use his help. And he's like, for what? And then she cackles with the implication that she is talking about butt stuff.
No. She cackles like she's going to rape him.
Yeah, in the butt.
No. Not in the butt.
She doesn't want to peg him?
No.
She looks like she does.
She's more of a, I feel like at least pegging, like that's that's an anniversary thing. That's
any other boy, I would disagree. But the way that Blair, I almost called her Britt, really seems to enjoy having the power over Leo makes me think that she's like looking around the room for something pointy and she cannot wait.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She hands him her books and remarks how tall he is.
Yeah.
And he is very tall.
Yeah.
And she says
something completely stupid. She says, I love tall men because they're head and shoulders above everyone else. That's not even a dad joke. That's a
bad joke.
Yeah.
She cackles again and then walks Leo out of the cafeteria like a lamb being led to slaughter. And then Roar enters with Joe and Mrs. Strudel. He's in the middle of making a joke about how Joe gets him really hard.
Yeah.
I laughed at this.
I wrote down in all caps, I hate that this show normalizes this bad, abusive behavior.
He wrote, "You shouldn't stand so close to me when I deliver bread. You turn it to toast."
Yeah. So she's supposed to take that as a compliment, that she is so sexy to him that she gives him an uncontrollable erection. She lights his loin on fire.
And crisps his bread.
Exactly.
I mean, I wish
And
somebody would say that to me. I would
if
be
you were
very
10 years,
flattered.
if you were 12 and you were and in 1982 and you saw that and you were marginally interested in, exploring sexual feelings, and this is the way it's being shown to you, you either get Roy being like, you get me rock hard and I come in my jeans every time I see you, or you get Leo, who's strong and silent, but you gonna say it?
I was waiting for you.
No.
I'll say it. Let's just say it. Leo's
So
retarded.
yeah. So and here's how it goes down. So Roy comes in, hits on Joe, being in a disgusting piece of shit, being like, sorry, I just came again in my pants because you're so beautiful. And then he's like, whoa, 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 where's Leo? Did he wander off again? And they're like, no, 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 he's with Blair. It's fine.
He was let off in the middle of his job.
Yeah. And then Natalie says she had him roped and tied in 6 seconds flat. Gotta be a new rodeo record. That's when I was like, oh shit, there's going to be a lot of like animal horse jokes in this. And I thought, oh no, they're going to compare this human being to an animal.
They didn't.
They didn't.
They didn't. Thank
They
goodness
didn't.
for small favors. I didn't even write that rodeo joke down. I was just like, nope.
Yeah. Anyway, so as soon as that happens, they're like, well, Blair took him away from us, even though we were like creaming our jeans for him. She roped him and took him away. Oh, he didn't wander off. And then, Roy's just like, well, I suppose Roy's good look with Roy's good looks. It doesn't matter that he's retarded. Strong R, whole word. We get that word a lot during this episode. So if you're listening, if you're watching, we are not using that word in 2020. This is 1982 style. This is really, really repellent and jarring. Every time I heard it, I thought I audibly gasped every single time.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I saw it on television, not expecting it. Today, I was ready for it with a hard R. I knew what we had coming, and but when you're not expecting it and you're flicking through the television and Mrs. Garrett says it, it is, oh, okay, that's a different. But also the look on Roy's face when he's like, I guess with Leo's looks, it doesn't matter that he's retarded. The grin, I debated how I felt about the grin. I decided that because I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I decided that the grin was, oh, good for Leo. Blair can see through his differently abledness, and I'm happy for him. And that's what the grin was. But it didn't feel like it was the grin.
No.
But I want that to be the grin, so I'm going to say that's what the grin was.
That wasn't the grin. The grin was, wow, he can get away with being mentally deficient because he's so good looking. And then,
I mean, Roy's like, I hope one day that I can.
And then he follows it up with a joke about himself, being like, yeah, I mean, I struggle with my good looks all the time. It's like all these women are coming on to me.
Sure, Roy, if that's what he needs to believe.
Yeah.
But record scratch, Joe's like, hold up, what? And then Mrs. Garrett's like,
she turns around and then she says it. Here's the great thing. For an episode that's like, basically, trying to talk about something that might make people uncomfortable, and normalize just having friendships with people who have, different abilities, right? They sure did drop the R word as many times as possible, in as many ways as possible. Mrs. Garrett even says mental retardation multiple times. As I texted you, I said, I wrote down in my thing, I can't believe that this shouldn't be in syndication. This is so or at least, have some nuts and put up a thing on a warning thing before you run this episode on, on Logo or whatever, being things were different in 82. We used a bad word. But I will say this, is that I feel like Facts of Life season 4 really started, as you said, it started resembling the thing that you liked the most, right? That you remember it being, right? And it wasn't as ham-fisted and as stupid as it was in the first few seasons. So this one, they were like, you know what we're going to do? This is about the facts of life. This is very serious. We're going to tackle it. We're going to have some jokes surrounding a very serious issue. Last week it was Tootie being concerned, not wanting to go to the doctor, being afraid of losing her hearing and being differently abled. So, okay, so we're going to tackle that. The week before that, it was about abortion, right? Except typical Facts of Life, not about abortion. They just wanted to drop that word a lot so that it seemed as though it was about abortion, but it was actually about free press and whether or not, and being sort of secretive about that a word that is so, polarizing, right? So in this episode, they were like, you know what? We got that abortion episode in the can. Let's do retards. Let's say it as many times as possible. Which is why this is again, really, some of them are sort of, innocuously bad. This is a, offensive episode. Because
its heart was in the right place.
No, it wasn't. And I will say, here's why. This was a, as the internet likes to say, congratulations, you made this issue about yourself. This was not about Leo. This was about Blair.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, she is a regular character on the show.
Yeah, do we ever see Leo again, aside from when he comes back as a completely different character? No. Let me ask you.
Aren't you thankful for that?
No. You know what? Here's the thing. Let's have him be on here as a semi-recurring, perfectly nice, guy, assistant to Roy, who's horrible, and does let me ask you, does Blair pursue, any interest in being a special ed teacher? Or does that evaporate?
It actually doesn't.
Oh. Wow.
She will find some noble causes, and she will end up in the education field. But we'll get there in a while. Yeah, so Mrs. Garrett's like, did you say Leo is retarded? And then Natalie is like, retarded, like mentally retarded?
I wrote down, it was as though they could, they just wanted everyone to say it. It was sort of it was one of those things where it was like, if I say it, you have to say it. It was like an agreement. No one cannot say it. So
Natalie's like, why did I have to say it twice, though? Retarded?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
no, and then Roy's like, whoa. I thought you understood.
Yeah, did you not talk to him? Did you not?
Well, no, here's the thing. They didn't talk to him. All they said was hi. So, I mean, Roy isn't the most sort of explicit person unless he's talking to Joe about how much he wants to get into her pants. He was like, I said he was slow. And they took him as literally as possible.
He was late, so it added up.
Yeah, and so Joe was like, no, Roy, we didn't understand. And then Tootie very ominously says, neither did Blair. So, new scene. Also, oh my God, new set. We're in the fucking library.
Before we get to the new set, I will say, like, what is the big deal here? Is this how we're supposed to always react when we meet somebody differently abled in 1982? Like, he is? Like, they were all very, and also, I felt like they all faced the camera and
Yes.
looked at us. And then they got angry with the person who supplied the info.
Yes.
Like, you were supposed to protect us from Leo.
Well, he didn't explain it as explicitly as he could have, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I also don't think it matters that much.
It doesn't. He's a part-time bakery delivery man's assistant. He seems nice. He's handsome. Like, you know, whatever.
But yes, the ominousness.
Blair's books to the library. Like, who gives a shit?
I know. But the ominousness of how Tootie is like, neither did Blair
was unbelievable. This is where I like lost my mind. I was like, what? So what do the writers think is going to happen? Like, what do they want the audience to think?
She delivered it as though it was like somebody in a thriller realizing their loved one was alone in a cabin with a killer.
Yeah. So, first of all, it's either, so the best reading, which Joe is the one who has this reading later on, is that Blair is such a narcissist that she's not going to let him speak, so that she's not going to talk to him and learn anything. She's not going to interact with him in any possible way, so that she's just going to be like blathering on and on about being Blair Warner and not realize this, and then be, I guess, you know, embarrassed by the fact that she made friends with a differently abled person. Anyway, or found this differently abled man attractive enough to have a conversation with. But the other thing is that the ominousness of that Blair, of Tootie being like, Blair doesn't know. It's either Leo's going to kill her, or Blair is going to rape him.
I think the second one is more likely, but the first one is definitely what the implication is from Tootie's mouth.
Yeah. So, and the other great thing about this is that and I know that we, like, everyone, obviously every single one of these girls has their pros and their cons, right? So it's like Blair is worldly and erudite, but she's also a total narcissist, you know, and talks all the time. Joe is hard as nails, but super smart. And once you get through that hardcore, she's actually very sweet and caring, and usually is on the right side of most, you know, bad things that happen, you know?
Yes.
Whatever. The Toots I'm not even going to get into because they're just a rat's nest. But I do think that, like, Blair is, this is such an odd sort of setup, because Blair does, and obviously everyone is, you know, not all people who are differently abled are the same, which they kind of make a weird joke about that later. But Blair does have a differently abled relative who is on this show all the time. She was on last week's episode.
Yeah, so which is why I don't necessarily know that we need Leo to recur.
Right. But so I would think that, like, Blair just would have I feel like people, and I know certain people who have grown up with differently abled, you know, relatives, siblings, that you develop a sensitivity to just, like, an empathy, or like, oh, I see that you are doing something slightly differently. And the way that Cousin Jerry was explaining to Tootie that she was noticing that she was doing things physically so that she could lean in, because she thought she was because she was losing her hearing, and she was trying to give her the good ear, which is what Cousin Jerry was doing. And so it's like, I do think that having Blair be this sort of like stupid one who is confronted with the hot, mentally challenged man and not realize that for like what seems like an hour.
She doesn't realize it, but when she does realize it, she is definitely sensitive to it. She's not like, ew, yuck. Like
Yeah.
I think her years of living with or knowing cousin Jerry have prepared her to
Yeah.
transition from I'm gonna fuck this guy to all right, I'll show him how to paint a road.
No, well, or this is a blank canvas for me, and I will help this person become the best that they can be. Right. Which is generous. That's a very generous reading.
Trying here. Trying. I definitely, as I promised, we are on our best behavior because,
Yes.
oh my God, this episode was not.
No, and
So,
also I have to say, so this is the longest scene in this episode.
which one? The one coming up?
The library.
Oh, it is.
Well, unless you count where they move from the cafeteria into the lounge and then
Okay.
that whole situation, I view that lounge scene separately. But I think that this library scene is library scene is really like quite shocking because of everything that happens in it. Because here's the thing, the entire audience knows, everyone aside from Blair knows that she is flirting with a mentally challenged man.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It might have just felt long.
Okay, whatever. But everyone knows that, which is basically, a typical format or thing for just any sort of play where the audience knows that the thing is outside the window you can't see. Like, so the person who comes in to the room, they don't know that the ghost is behind the
hilarity ensues.
Right.
It's classic sitcom setup.
Yeah.
I'm flirting with a guy. That guy is mentally handicapped, and I don't know. Classic comedy setup.
Yeah. So
I think they did it on I Love Lucy.
Which means that the audience, which means that the audience is complicit in these jokes now because they're laughing. At her being like, are you sure she comes into the library and she says, are you sure you don't mind helping me pick out something to read? I wouldn't want to be a bother unless you have some other, important thing to go to. And
he looks at her, social engagement.
And he looks at her and he goes, you have pretty hair.
Just bought himself 10 more minutes of her not knowing.
Yeah. The audience laughs.
Well, could they be laughing at how easily, I'm being generous here, how easily Blair is motivated to not see what's in front of her eyes once presented with a compliment?
You are being unbearably generous, which is, I think, your role on this podcast.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I want to give the show and Diane Messina the benefit of the doubt because she's still working today. Oh, but that movie she wrote was a Christmas movie, by the way, for Hallmark, I believe. That 2018 Diane Messina. I forgot to mention that she does Christmas movies now, so I could get some of that work. So I do love
those Christmas. We watched a Christmas movie on this pod, so I do love those. Anyway, so then she's like, okay, so I will give you the benefit of the doubt that like Blair is sort of like, oh, I do have great hair. Thank you. Kind of ignoring the fact that he's like, I never learned to read,
or he never says that.
But at least that's what the audience is being led to think. Because later on, she's like, you want to read this? And he's like, are there pictures in it?
Well, yeah, it goes right into it, actually. Because he says, you have pretty hair. And then she's like, all right, I'm going to need some lady porn tonight. Let's pick out a romance novel for me to read in bed, thinking about that moment that we just shared. And then she suggests Emily Bronte, Eric Siegel, or Masters and Johnson.
Okay,
holy shit, that joke.
Yes. So let's pause for a minute. So first of all, Emily Bronte obviously is Wuthering Heights. She only wrote one book. Eric Siegel is obviously Love Story, right? Both of those involve two dead women as the main protagonists. And
She likes
Master,
sad romance.
yes. But also, so in Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff is basically regarded as like a bumbling, like, Hulk smash. Like he's like lower class garbage orphan. And so the family hates him. So it's like, really, did we need to choose these guys? Did we really need to choose these books? And then these writers go there. They went to Masters and Johnson. Do you want to explain what that is?
Sure. They were famously depicted in the series Masters of Sex.
Yes.
They are a sexual research team that famously documented the sexual practices and dysfunctions of more than 600 people in the 60s. They're responsible for discovering that vaginal lubricant does not come from the cervix, it comes from CVS. They also spent a decade. They also spent a decade converting homosexuals straight with a 71.6 success rate.
So that was just him. She later disavowed that.
Yeah, later. It was also still her.
Yeah.
But
she also was very shifty because she was like, they were kept being like, oh yeah, Dr. Masters and Dr. Johnson. And she was like, yeah, I'm Dr. Johnson. No university accreditation at all. She was just like fucking her, science assistant. So.
Doctor by injection.
Yeah.
71.6 success rate is nothing to sneeze at. I would investigate this further.
Anyway.
They published a book on their findings just as homosexuality was being removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which came off as tone deaf. The book was shunned by critics.
She hated it. She disavowed it. This was the dude who published that. Anyway, but the other great thing is that they also appeared on a very poorly received NBC Daily News program called America Live in 1978 as authorities on sex. It ran from noon to 1 for like a year. It was sort of like a gossipy, sort of like Entertainment Tonight sort of thing. And they came on just to talk about the news, but they were the ones giving the POV on sex.
Like, we found you can put it in the butt.
Yeah.
Because these are early days.
Yeah.
I don't think Leo got her Masters and Johnson joke.
Well, but the audience sure did. Because, so they wrote two very famous books. They wrote Human Sexual Response and Human Sexual Inadequacy. And I actually expected this to be a Joy of Sex joke rather than Human Sexual Response. But, this was way more sophisticated than my taste.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that he's like, are there pictures in it? And it's
don't do the voice.
I'm not trying to, but it's like he was trying to not do the voice, and they wanted him to because they wrote these lines like this. It's so
he was doing the voice.
It's so awful. It's like, you have pretty hair. Are there
she liked the "Are there pictures in it" comment. She thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, she was like, oh, sweet. Yes, there are. So it's like, oh, when I was like a little girl and I was like, exploring my sexuality, any sort of medical picture would be of interest to me. So it would be like, I'd look at the dictionary and it would be like penis. And there was like a drawing of a penis, like a very anatomical, specific one. And I'd be like, this is of interest to me.
Is that why you married Peter? Because he has little tattoos all around his penis that like say what, like the urethra and then like a line pointing to it and stuff like that?
Yeah, being like, this is the vas deferens.
That's what I'm into.
Yeah.
There's a vast difference between what you're into and what I'm into. But not Blair and Leo. They are so simpatico. Yeah, to pull a transition. Blair pulls one of her favorite books, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Such a sad story. he's worried it's going to make him cry. And she's
Yeah.
moistened by the idea of a man in touch with his emotions. He cannot put a foot wrong. He is that beautiful and tall.
Yeah. He's saying all the right things. You've
Mhm.
got pretty hair. Does it have pictures? Will it make me cry?
And then we get into the Three's Company style misunderstanding.
Oh
With
my
Blair.
God.
Would you like to take this one?
No, you do it.
So Blair basically wonders why they haven't met, and he suggests it's because they're not in the same class. And clearly, he's talking about some special education class, but she assumes he means that she's upper class and he's middle class, and Roy, because he's less attractive, she points out, is lower class.
Yes.
Didn't love this.
So this was like the worst thing. This was literally, as you said this was Three's Company. This was fucking who's on first, what's on second. I don't know, is on third type, like, Abbott and Costello about like who's holding the hot potato and like the misunderstandings of like talking about whether someone is mentally challenged. This was so horrible because the audience kept roaring with laughter because it was like, yeah, I take a special class for drawing. Roy's not in my class. I go to a special place. Oh, you go to Bates? Yeah, I go to a special place. Oh, I wanted to go to a special academy, but a place for gifted kids, but I like going here because my intelligence is, appreciated. And I was also voted Harvest Queen 3 years in a row.
I know, that was crazy. She's like, I could have been gifted, but I chose the life of being Harvest Queen. So
what in the hell?
Bizarre. I also like how she says he's gonna go far, and he's like, "Oh no, it's just a few miles from here." And she's like, "Huh?" And he's like, "My school." And she's like, "Peak Skill High," and then he goes, "No," just like the guy in the movie The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston. When he gets arrested, he goes, because there's like a stalker who's not the real bad guy. And they arrest him. And it's a plot twist, and then they go to arrest him. He's like, for trying to kill Whitney Houston, and he's like, no. It was exactly the same tone. It was so weird. It really brought me back. And then she gets so excited, and she's like, Bates, you're a Bates boy. That is so hot. All of my sex is with Bates boys. And
Because
he's like, no.
Wait, Leo, are you also a rapist? You a rapist? Because that's what turns me on.
Yeah, you could rape me if you want. That's cool.
Yeah.
And he says, no, he goes to a special school. And I'm like, Blair, how are you not getting this?
Yeah.
And then she does the whole thing about like how I could have been gifted, but I chose to be a harvest ball. And he's like, what are you fucking talking about? I'm trying to tell you I'm retarded.
Yes. And she says, and then he goes, I like to draw. And she says, so do I. She goes, Leo, you and I have so much in common. I'm pretty handy with a palette and canvas myself, Do you prefer oils or acrylics? And he says, what do you mean? And she says, well, what do you paint with? I literally wrote down right here, oh God, oh no. Because I know exactly what was going to happen. Some of the kids in my school paint with their fingers still, but I'm real good. So I paint with a brush.
She still doesn't get it for a minute, but she laughs, and then she looks at the blank void in his face, and then she's like, a special school? And he's like, uh-huh. And then she like turns to face the camera and gives the audience and, oh my God, I'm in the library with somebody who's mentally handicapped face. Yeah. Which is like,
oh no. And here's the great thing is that, so now we're back in the cafeteria, right?
We are. Shocker.
And again, there's no B plot at all. At all. Nothing going on. So
to quote that Ben Stiller movie that I forget the name of, this show went full retard.
I have a whole thing about that. We're going all into that. So So because there's only an A plot, right?
Well,
All
the
the
bread
other,
was late.
well, yeah,
I'm
but
kidding.
that's because of Leo.
Yeah, no, I know.
So because there's only one plot, everyone who should be minding their fucking business, doing homework, cleaning dishes, doing laundry, trying out for the play, trying out for the track team, repairing her motorbike, whatever, whatever they could be doing. No, they need to be involved in this bullshit.
It doesn't matter what day it is, how long it's been. They're gonna open up every scene just commenting on this.
Yeah.
Which is
So,
what they did last time with Marie Thornwell.
sorry, there's a siren outside. By the way.
I hear it. That's fine. But it's what they did last time with Marie Thornwell as well. Like, it was days later, and it would just be like one of the girls being like, I can't believe she hangs out with Marie Thornwell.
I know. What the hell? Yeah. So anyway, so then Joe and Tootie are sitting together. Not the usual twosome that I expected, right?
Yeah. Joe is wondering how long it'll be before Blair figures this out, and the answer is surprisingly long.
Yeah, that's true.
And Joe clocks this, saying she might not take a breath till Wednesday, and even then, it'll take quite a bit of conversation before she figures it out.
Yeah.
But
And
Tootie
Tootie's just like, oh, I hope she doesn't say anything dumb. And then Joe's like, well, we're talking Blair here. And it's like, well, I guess lol, but like, it's so lazy.
No, I
And
know.
then-
I wrote in all caps. Tootie is the one who would say something dumb, not Blair. Tootie.
Yeah. Tootie's the one who'd be like, wait, are you mentally challenged? Like, straight to their face.
And they'd be like, we don't call it that, Tootie.
Yeah, exactly.
Nat's got a plan.
Oh my God. And this
is
actually,
my favorite part of the episode.
I have to say, this is the low point. This was the lowest point.
This is my favorite part of the episode, by far. This is what I said. There was like one moment that made me laugh, like out loud hard. It was this. Nat's got a plan. One of them will have to tell Blair. Natalie is going to cut straws in 3 different lengths and put them in her hand, and everybody will pull a straw out. And the person who has the shortest straw, she will have to tell Blair. And then Tootie leans in and goes, okay, so let me get this straight. We're going to draw straws? That was like 7 minutes of the episode to describe what draw. And you know that this was a creative attempt at a network note. Somebody said, we'll draw straws. And then the network or somebody was like, kids aren't going to know what drawing straws are. They only know about Masters and Johnson. And so they're like, all right, so we'll do a complicated explanation of drawing straws. And then somebody was like, that took 20 minutes. That's really weird. And so it was like, we'll turn it into a joke. And then Tootie. So I genuinely did laugh at that. I liked the vibe of the girls busting each other's chops in ways that don't involve old ladies and retarded people and abortions and suicide attempts and sexual assaults. I found this to be a funny little aside.
An aside where they shouldn't even be involving themselves.
I agree. Now, that is another note that I have. I wrote in all caps serious talk, and then I wrote, I don't think that these girls need to do this. I think Blair can figure this out on their own, and even if she doesn't, they should stay out of it.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the drawing straws bit regardless.
I hated it. I didn't even like write it down. I was just like, I literally wrote down what the fuck.
I genuinely laughed so hard during that bit. But they draw straws, and Joe accuses Natalie of cheating, which doesn't really seem possible since she's the one holding the straws. But when she's left with the short one, she was like, hey, this wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, so she was cheating.
How?
She was attempting to cheat. She was trying to foist the short straw on one of the other 2 girls and somehow managed to have it on her own. Anyway, so then Mrs. Garrett comes in and she's like, Mrs. Garrett, what am I gonna do? I have to tell Blair, and then
she
Mrs.
goes.
Garrett,
her words are, "How do you tell someone like Blair about someone like Leo?" And it's written fairly innocuously, but it's delivered so offensively.
It is. Yes, it is. And Mrs. Garrett then also sort of makes a non-joke. She's like, well, You can try the honest approach. It works sometimes. Like, don't even just try the honest approach and then leave.
Yeah, because Natalie has a not funny joke that she's gonna say anyway, and it's based on honest. So it was about sending her an honest telegram from Australia. Perhaps some more foreshadowing for their next TV movie venture.
Ah.
6 years in the making.
Anyway, so no. So Natalie is freaking out because she's like, oh shit, I drew the short straw on a game of my own devising where I could literally just say, you know what? Actually, I thought about this and maybe we should just stay out of it. Maybe we should let Blair discover this fact on her own, not involve ourselves. She goes over, frets about it, talks to Mrs. Garrett, goes back over to like the kitchen sink, and then Tootie comes over and she's like, okay, I got it.
She came up with how to say it. She came up with
like,
a really good way of saying it.
Look her in the eye and say, Blair, I have something I need to tell you about Leo. He's retarded.
I'm glad that she decided to share that super helpful piece of advice. That creative turn of phrase really spun this into something that I think Blair will be able to handle.
Yeah. Blair obviously is there and is like, yeah. Of course. I've known this whole time.
Yeah, why can't we have any drama on this show? Like in classic Facts of Lifestyle, we don't get to see Natalie tell her while Joe is 50 feet away like she wanted to be. Although I think Joe would be right up in front with a popcorn if she had the opportunity.
Here's the most dramatic part of this entire episode. So Blair comes in looking like the cat who swallowed the canary. She's like, oh, yeah. Of course. Of course Leo's a retard. I know that. Ugh. And she
doesn't say that.
Well, she's like, you can all relax. I already know about Leo.
Yes.
And they're all like, oh, well, thank God. Okay. Whew. Well, doesn't that put you in a tight situation? You know, and then she's like.
Joe's like, how you going to shake the guy?
Yeah, and then she's like, how are you going to shake the guy? It's like, you can't just ghost him, basically.
Blair's like, I'm not going to shake him. I'm going to fuck him.
And then she's like, no. I'm not going to. I like him. We're going out on Saturday. Oh, my God. Everyone lost their goddamn minds. Because at this point, the audience thinks that Blair wants to fuck him.
I still think that. I think that through for the rest of the episode.
Yeah. But I think as you keep watching, she doesn't. She just wants to
fuck him.
Improve. She just wants to improve him and help him reach his full potential. Much like Keith Raniere at NXIVM, the next cult leader. But no, they're all just like scandalized. They're like, oh my God.
Because they're all picturing it. All of them. You can tell the minute she says, I'm going out with him Saturday night, they're all like, oh my God, I'm imagining the intercourse. And like that will come up in the next scene, I believe. I think Tootie is worried about her Lennying him in bed.
Oh my God. Not only that, the entire audience is now led to think that Blair's like, I'm kind of liking this vibe. I'm enjoying this vibe. I like this. I'm exploring, guys. Let me have my thing. Leo is beautiful. He likes my hair and paints with his tongue on my clit.
I definitely think that she's still like, sex is on the table. Like, look, he's not the brightest bulb, but he's cute. Like, that was a thing in the 80s, you know? Like, this is Buck. He's dumb, but filled with muscles.
Okay. So here's where I kind of want to pause and discuss the use of the mentally challenged in TV and film.
By all means, we're at our commercial break. This is a perfect time to have a little discussion.
Okay. So this hews very close to a 1979 movie called Tim, which stars Piper Laurie and Mel Gibson in one of his first film roles, where Piper Laurie, who very famously played Carrie's mom in Carrie.
That wasn't Sissy Spacek?
No, Sissy Spacek is Carrie.
Okay, yeah. I forgot that Sissy Spacek wasn't always old.
Yes.
Go on.
Anyway, so in this film, which is based on a novel, a expat 40-something American woman who's very successful and grounded, and she's just like, I gotta get out of here. Moves to Australia and hires a gardener and like a sort of like all around handyman who is Mel Gibson, who is mentally challenged.
But so dreamy.
But obviously so dreamy. He lives with his family, and his family is very suspicious of their friendship and whatever. Anyway, it turns into a romance, and it is treated in the film as a very romantic, erotic romance, and they marry one another. They get married to one another. And this sort of, Piper Laurie describes it in this film by basically, it's like, being with him, there's a just sort of purity of the love, and the eroticism is just so innocent and direct. And it's just like, I don't know about this. Like, this isn't cool. Anyway, so they remade that film in 1996 for a TV movie.
Was it still called Tim?
No, it was called Mary and Tim.
Oh, okay.
Starring Candice Bergen and Tom McCarthy, who, you know who that is?
Remind me, the name's familiar.
So he's a director and a writer mostly, but he plays a mentally challenged gardener. He went on to be nominated. He wrote and directed Spotlight, so he's doing good. Anyway, in 1996, they made this made-for-TV movie with Candice Bergen, who looks still incredibly beautiful, and Tom McCarthy at the time was just like jacked, like very big man. And I watched the trailer, which basically is just like a super cut of the entire film. So Candice Bergen plays a like 50-year-old widow who had like a beautiful marriage and now is just, falling in love with her gardener. And she's describing how great he is, but he only has like a slight mental deficiency. And Louise Latham, who was in Hitchcock films, who has a smoky voice, she barks out, she goes, "Even so, it could fall under the category of a stray cat rescue." Which is how her friend is regarding her relationship with this young man.
I mean, I will say that sounds like how my friends have described the last couple of boyfriends I've had. So
there is a scene in Mary and Tim where Candice Bergen sadly looks at a photograph of her dead husband and cries while eating soup. So that's fun. But also, I do want to just discuss the use of people who are mentally challenged in film and why it is offensive and weird. Because something like Tim, which I guess is and like this episode, like is I guess supposedly here to, talk about it and give representation or whatever. But no one aside from Cousin Jerry is actually mentally challenged in any of these.
Well, that is why I do give this show so much more credit than most, because they are the first show to do that, and they're kind of like one of two.
Well, Life Goes On.
That's the other one I was thinking of with the one of two.
Yeah, but Life Goes On was basically like, Corky is just part of our family and gets to have a life. It's not just constantly revolving around like being like normalizing the fact that he might be, differently abled. But the other thing is that there are a lot of films that like should have known better than to do this, like I Am Sam, the one with Sean Penn, where he has sex with a homeless woman and then wants to get custody of Dakota Fanning, who's his like precocious daughter.
I haven't seen it,
yes.
but I have the soundtrack because Michael Penn's on it. I like Michael Penn.
Okay, so Dakota Fanning is this very sweet little girl named Lucy. I'm just reading the plot. And she's unbelievably smart, but and is well taken care of by her father, Sam, played by Sean Penn, and the kind agoraphobic neighbor, played by Diane Wiest. But anyway, in danger of losing custody, Sam gets advice from his friends and hires a lawyer, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, whose absorption in her work and neglect of her son reveal her to be at least as handicapped as Sam is, although in a socially acceptable way. That's remarkable. This film came out in 2001. This episode of Facts of Life came out in 1982. This episode has an excuse. Sean Penn in 2001 certainly does not. The other film that I just needed to bring up, which is insane,
Tropic Thunder. That was the
Tropic
movie
Thunder
I was trying to think of.
Yes. Well, so the other movie that I just want to bring up is The Other Sister, which is a rom-com starring Juliette Lewis and Giovanni Ribisi as two mentally handicapped people who fall in love. It's a rom-com with Tom Skerritt and Diane Keaton as the mom and dad of Juliette Lewis. It is one of the most uncomfortable films I have ever seen in my entire life.
It's not even the most uncomfortable movie about mental handicapped people with the word sister in the title. Because I'm thinking of Riding the Bus with My Sister.
Riding the Bus with My Sister.
Which is the most uncomfortable movie I've ever seen in my life. Well, I will agree. The Other Sister is one of the most uncomfortable movies I've ever seen in my life. Rosie O'Donnell took it to another level. I feel like Juliette Lewis's performance and Giovanni Ribisi's as well were nuanced in comparison.
Yes, in comparison, but that's like being like, you know what?
I'm not defending either of these movies. I'm just saying.
So
one
let's just talk about
one makes you want to rip your eyeballs out.
Let me just do one little bit on the Other Sister. The great thing about that is so Juliette Lewis falls and Giovanni Ribisi fall in love, and Giovanni Ribisi has a certain amount of freedom because they're high functioning, they're good. Like, he lives in his own apartment, he has his own car, he really loves marching band music, but the greatest thing is that they this film was co-written and directed by Gary Marshall, who directed Pretty Woman. So, and like Gary Marshall
with Amesy Strickland.
Yes. So, but Gary Marshall, if everyone doesn't know who that is, he's a very famous, romantic comedy director and writer, but he also plays Mr. Candyman Mr. Candy Bar in A League of Their Own, which is directed by his sister, Amy Marshall. It's Amy, right? Amy Marshall? Shit. Penny. Yeah. Anyway, so just the notion of the fact that Gary Marshall, who had made a very famous, well-regarded romantic comedy, The Hooker with the Heart of Gold, Pretty Woman, which is already pretty offensive and disgusting if you rewatch it, then moves on and is like, you know what I'm going to do? I want to do these two mental handicapped people falling in love. That's where my heart is. That's the story. Those are the stories I want to tell.
Why not?
Because he's a 100-year-old man who probably hasn't met a single mentally challenged person in his entire life.
You don't think Gary Marshall's met a mentally challenged person in his life?
No,
He's like
not the way
100.
that movie's directed.
Can I ask you a question? Is Benny and June the same plot? I cannot. I saw it in the theater when I was a child, and in my head, Benny and June were either bohemian or they were mentally challenged. And I saw this around the time as the other sister as well, and those movies have smushed together in my head.
So I think it's vague on purpose about that, because
Oh, okay.
I think Johnny Depp is playing it being slightly mentally challenged, but also bohemian. So we don't know, you know. Um, but again, I think he's kind of the manic pixie dream boy in that film. You know, he wears a lot of top hats.
I remember that being like a manic pixie dream, fever dream. That
Yes.
movie.
And so the last thing that I want to bring up is, as you said, Tropic Thunder, right? Which is, you know, a parody of, you know, Apocalypse Now, like a war movie in Vietnam, right? And as you said, the thing about is that it's a parody about movie making in general, and how, especially in the 80s and the early 90s, to get a Oscar nomination and win an Academy Award, a lot of famous actors either played mentally challenged people, people with who were differently abled, handicapped, like my left foot, right? Um, or for women, you had to play a hooker or you had to die to win an Academy Award. And so in Tropic Thunder, Ben Stiller's character plays this, like, you know, I guess sort of like a Tom Cruise-esque guy who's very like insecure but always wants to win an award. And all of his all of his like advisors and managers are advising him. They're like, listen, man, like you can't go full retard in a film. You can go like partial, but you can't go full, because then you lose everyone. You lose everyone. And so he does go, quote, full retard in a film that is so notoriously bad. It's called what? Simple Peter? Something like that.
I haven't seen it in a while, but that sounds right. And it also
And
sounds like something you should call your husband.
and it's one of those films that's so notoriously bad and so embarrassing that he goes out of his way to have every single copy destroyed. It's like you can't, to work with him, you have to basically say you don't know that it exists. You know, you have to say you don't know anything about it. Anyway, cut to the only, it's also very racist. The only copy of, let's just call it Simple Peter, that exists in the world anymore is a VHS copy of it that lands in someplace like Vietnam, in some sort of jungle community where they have like one old TV. And this is the only thing, they're completely isolated from the outer world. And Ben Stiller, as this Tom Cruise aggro character, gets kidnapped and by these people, and they're going to kill him. And then they recognize him from the only video that they have seen, which is Simple Peter or whatever, where he plays this simple-minded, you know, mentally challenged person. And because it's new technology, they regard him as a god. So they don't slaughter him. So it's like you can't go full retard to win an Academy Award, but you should go full retard to save your life when your life is threatened by cannibals. So that's how Hollywood likes to enjoy using characters that are mentally challenged.
Well, thank you for that
Thank
interstitial.
you for coming to my brief TED Talk.
And now we will get back. We're back from commercial break. Somehow we survived that act, and we're still in the cafeteria. But now it's Saturday night, I presume, because Tootie is dressed like my grandma and acting like Blair's out with the Bates boy. Really, really worried.
Yeah.
Can't these girls see that Leo is probably the safest man to go out with in the entire godforsaken town of Peekskill?
Oh my God. He's so nice.
I feel like just everybody else, like even Mr. Parker would be a bad choice. Tootie is psychopathically admitting that she called the theater, found out when the movie ended, checked the bus schedule, so Blair should have been back 11 minutes ago, so she must have been murdered. And at this part, I wrote, I'm surprised the phrase retard strength hasn't been used, but I spoke too soon because Tootie immediately at that point explains to Mrs. Garrett what her worry is. She's remembering having read Of Mice and Men, and oh, God.
Yeah. She goes, Mrs. Garrett, do you remember that I read that Steinbeck book? And Mrs. Garrett's like, oh, yeah. Of Mice and Men, I guess, to give Mrs. Garrett a line. And she's like, yeah, Leo is basically Lenny. First, he starts with the mice. Then he goes to the puppy. And then he kills a woman because he doesn't know his own strength.
And also, the names are very similar.
Yes. And then Mrs. Garrett comes in with a cool rejoinder. Just because someone is mentally retarded doesn't mean he's dangerous or violent. I was like, and then, she's like, when I was your age, she was like, this wasn't even discussed.
Yeah, they didn't talk about people. In fact, they didn't even use the word.
No, she said, the whole subject of mental retardation was strictly off limits. And then, for no reason, Natalie comes in with a one-liner.
Sex, religion, and politics. What else was there to discuss? Like, the 4 pillars of conversation in the 60s were sex, religion, politics, and mental retardation.
Yeah.
But before we were allowed to talk about those things, there was Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner.
Yeah.
Did you do a deep dive? Because I sure did.
Well, she goes, well, we got a lot of mileage out of Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. Well, so, here's the thing. This is sex. They notoriously had a very violent and B off again, on again, sexy relationship. They were constantly cheating on one another, constantly cheating on their spouses with one another. He was kind of in a low point of his career and she was dragging him along. And then, he beat her up and then anyway.
He left his wife for her.
Yeah.
They married the day after she received a letter from a prostitute claiming he was cheating on her. They had affairs on one another. She secretly aborted the baby he was ecstatic about in another country behind his back. He tried to kill himself multiple times. He slashed his wrists just to get her to go to the hospital, and supposedly she begged casting directors to cast him in From Here to Eternity after they had split up without him knowing, which he was nominated for an Oscar for, just because she was worried that their breakup had made him suicidal.
Yeah.
My goodness, between this and the Masters of Sex reference, if you're aware of the things they're referencing, you can go down a dark hole.
Yeah, you sure can.
Joe is on the right side of history and say that people do not understand mental retardation yet.
Okay. So Joe comes in. This is where I lost my mind.
I can't imagine why.
So Joe pipes up. She's like, they might not discuss it, but they might discuss it, but they don't understand it. There was this kid on my block. His name was Ricky. They used to call him Ricky Retardo. Okay. As I said, I listened to these episodes with my earbuds in. I said, oh, no. I was no cat when I heard her say that out loud.
She also, it looked like Nancy McKeon wanted to do anything but say that line.
I have to say this. I think that they did a couple takes and they had to make the audience not laugh. They had to be like, no, please don't laugh at that. Please. Because I feel like this audience, which was like whoop-wooing, like, and laughing at everything, they were primed. They were like, Ricky Retardo? That's great. I'm going to call that retard on my block that. Like, it was gross.
It was. She said it. She really threw it away. She was like, they called him Ricky Ritardo. Like she really did not want to say it. Kids threw rocks at him at the playground, so he'd
Chase him
only come
away.
around when nobody was there. And she would play with him. And then she goes, apparently, she says he had a heck of a sinker, which then gets a laugh. I wrote, this is suspect that the audience didn't laugh at Ricky Ritardo, but then did laugh at he had a heck of a sinker, which doesn't seem to be like a joke.
No. I told you.
It was weird. Blair returns to a furious Tootie. She's now 37 minutes late. Nobody cares, Tootie. Shut the fuck up. They walked home since it was such a lovely night, and then Blair goes on about how perceptive Leo is. It's really tacky, condescending, and yucky as fuck.
Yeah, he said, like, because Mrs. Garrett asked, she's like, how was the movie? She said, well, it wasn't a classic, but, God, Leo, he's so perceptive. He laughed in all the right places.
Oh.
I know. As soon as I was like, oh, no, here we go.
And then he notices things like the moon and the stars and Blair's smile that apparently other people do not, but I feel like I noticed the moon.
And the stars and Blair's smile.
Yeah, I mean, we compliment her hair all the time. We notice things.
Yeah, and then they're like on their walk home, he's like, oh yeah, you see that house? It looks like a gingerbread with icing on it. And she's like, oh shit, it does. He sees shit I can't see. And it's like, does he?
And then she says she's going to take him on a Victorian mansions tour tomorrow, which sounds horrible. Like, I would hate to have to go on a Victorian mansions tour with Blair and Leo pointing out, oh, that one also looks like a gingerbread house. And that one looks like a gingerbread house. And that one looks like a gingerbread.
Yeah. But okay, so basically,
then Coldplay's "Fix You" starts to play.
Yeah. So that's the thing, this is a, as usual, a congratulations, you made this about yourself episode. So in comes Blair. It just basically, it's like, so this is an episode where Blair learns that, someone with a mental disability, is actually a human being rather than, an empty vessel of potential.
Yes.
So this is literally about Blair learning that lesson rather than being like, why don't we introduce Leo as a cool new actor or character who can come in sometimes and, be like, hey, you want to go on a house tour? I don't know.
As I said, I do not want to go on a Victorian mansion tour with Leo and Blair, so I hope that does not happen. But Blair's going through the paper in the things to do section for things to do with Leo. Top of the list is butt stuff. It's not in the paper. She just wrote it in herself. Mrs. Garrett gives some advice. Dealing with Leo isn't as easy as you think. And Blair, you are not a professional. Do you need to be a professional to date Leo?
Like a prostitute?
No, just like a therapist, somebody with experience with, as Mrs. Garrett would put it, mental retardation in order to date Leo. Or can you be I'm positing this in general, can you be a layman, just a person off the street, and date somebody that is mentally handicapped?
Well, of course you can. Obviously it comes down to their, how much consent they can give, how actually, whether their disability is really that strong that they can't.
I'm pretty sure Leo consented at the minute he said, you have pretty hair.
Yeah.
But, I don't want to be like what is consent? Is you have pretty hair consent in the, not differently abled world? I don't know. I don't want to guess. So
clearly, and that's in the people who wrote this, in their mind, it's like, it's just a very short, connection between you have really pretty hair and Lenny being like, oh, so pretty. And then,
but at least in Tootie's eyes,
Mrs.
Garrett says no. That is the lesson we're trying to learn.
Yeah.
Miss Garrett reminds Blair that Leo is special, and she's like, "That's why I'm giving him special attention." And she's
Yeah.
like, "That's not what I mean."
No, I know. And I literally wrote like, that's why it's like, yes, I know he is special. That's why I'm giving him my special attention, which is literally what pedophiles say about their victims.
And then Blair, famous last words that she knows exactly what she's doing. And every time I pause this episode to write notes, Tootie is in the background making a grumpy face, like just a distasteful grimace on her face, pissed off.
Well, right, which I actually thought was weird direction because right before she was all pissy, being like, "I think that Leo's gonna kill her," and now she's like, "Oh, now Blair's taking an interest in him." No,
And then also weird direction. The scene ends with Tootie sidling up to Blair like she's about to say something, and then it fades out. You're like,
yeah,
what was that? But now we're in a new scene, same location, of course, because the direction is on fleek this episode.
yeah,
Joe is recalling the good old days when there were 4 people to do all their work, but then Blair's now always out with dudes. So I feel like Blair was always out with dudes. It's not just Leo, but Tootie dimly goes, "Do you mean before Leo?"
hmm
No shit. Of course
yeah.
that's what she means. There's
No,
no other
and
plot in
then
this
Joe.
episode. They're talking about nothing else.
No, and Joe said, of course, and Joe says, before Blair decided to become the miracle worker. But again,
Another shocked face.
like really, like not all disabilities are the same. The miracle worker, like Helen Keller didn't have a learning disability. She wasn't, mentally challenged. She was just deaf and blind. Like,
Yeah.
like we can't just sort of just use a very wide paintbrush to just
I
basically
mean,
say
we
all these
can
people are the
and
same.
we are. That is what season 4 is about. We're not making it, you and I. This
Yes.
is the Messina's problem.
Yeah.
Diane, I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
I for some reason I forgive Lou Messina in all this mess. I don't know why. Mainly because he hasn't worked since 1990, so I pity him. Whereas she had a 4-decade career that I want.
Okay.
So Natalie, however, is impressed with Blair's commitment. How many things to do she's done with Leo.
Yeah.
Today, she's brought down her easel and canvas. It's painting lesson day with Leo, and Mrs.
Yeah.
Garrett has decided to passive aggressively interfere.
Yes. No. Mrs. Garrett very much looks at Blair, who comes in holding an easel, goes into the lounge, follows her into the lounge. Blair is setting up her easel uh fuck
Paint?
paint, yeah,
A
and so
canvas?
canvas. There we go. Sorry. And she's like, of course, we never see the painting that they're planning on painting together, which again, weird, also not correct. And she's just like, Mrs. Garrett's just sort of like hovering, being like, "What's going on in here?" And she's like, "Mrs. Garrett, would you please make sure we're not disturbed while we create?"
Yes. And then she's like, "Oh no, but I've
And
got
Leo
warm
comes in, and then
cookies in the oven."
Leo comes in, and he's like holding his I guess sketchbook. And Mrs. Garrett's just like, "Oh, hi, Leo," and she's like, "Well, I guess that means that you don't want any fresh cookies." And Leo's like, his head just bashful, his head goes down. He's like,
No, he went, "Aw."
"Oh."
He was
And
he
the
reacted
audience
he reacted
laughed.
exactly the way I would have reacted if I found out that my painting partner has designated this a no cookie day. I 100% would have been, "Aw." So I will say that I felt like the audience laughed because they were like, "Oh, he's just like me. I also like cookies and would be sad when they weren't offered."
Absolutely not. This entire audience is primed to be like, "Oh, of course, they're doing arts and crafts. Of course, when the juice and cookies aren't available, he's going to be sad because he has the mental capabilities of a 5-year-old."
And just to go back for a second though, there was this point where uh, Leo is delighted when Mrs. Garrett says that Blair considers him a very good painter, but he was already painting with a brush at his special school. So why is painting the thing that Blair has decided to broaden his horizon with?
Because that's her thing.
Yeah, but we already know that he knows how to do it. So you're just playing to his strength, which even IMDb calls him a retarded artist. So I just feel like there's a reason why Blair is trying to show him new things, but then she's just doing like what his teacher does. I feel like there's no broadening his horizons, which is fine. Work within his comfort zone. He knows how to paint. But then she's doing nothing wrong, in my opinion. She's brought him over to do a thing that she knows he can handle.
No.
It's a thing that she knows she can handle because she paints, and he can handle because he's already talked about how he's so good he gets to use the brush. So she's like, all right, this will be a cinch. This is a thing that I can trust. But then she talks later on about how she's pushing him and broadening his horizons. I just feel like
absolutely not. You are coming to this with way too good faith. They can't. So first of all, she's pushing him too hard. That's the thing. He knows how to paint. She was like, oh, sweet, I know how to paint. And then she dumped on him a book about Picasso, like straight out of the gate. So many people right now don't even understand why cubism matters. He's like, oh, they only have one eye, And so it's like, he's like,
but she's okay with that. She found that simply adorable.
No, she did not. She corrected him and then was charmed by the fact that he was like, he noticed the fact that she has 3 colors in her eyes rather than the mistake that he was like, I'm going to do 3 of them for when I paint you. She's like, Leon, you know that I don't have 3 eyes. And he's like, no. I mean, the 3 colors, brown.
But that's not how anybody speaks. That's not a mental handicap issue. That was just, I'm going to paint all 3 of yours. That was misleading. You were talking about eyes.
Yes. Of course it was
bad writing,
because,
is what I'm saying.
Because the writers wanted the audience to laugh at Leo. They wanted this to be a joke.
It was very uncomfortable for me, especially when he closed his eyes and described what Hazel is.
Yeah, no.
And then Blair loved it, though.
Well, yeah, because he was telling her that he noticed something about her.
Well, he also noticed that she gets red around the edges and there's black mascara goop on the sides, and she didn't love that.
No.
That was noticing something about him.
No.
So today, Blair is going to teach a lesson about perspective. She explains that when things get further away, they get smaller, or in the case of the facts of life, more offensive.
Yes.
She has him draw a road, and then she laughs at him.
Yeah.
This is where I was like, whoa. This is where it went off the rails for me.
This is where it went off the rails for you? This far in. At this point, I was checking. I was like, God, Jesus, how much more time is there in this? Why is this only... I was like, how is there 5 more minutes of this episode? This should be it.
I couldn't believe that
I want to get through this scene as quickly as possible. So she basically is like,
no.
So, what?
There's a lot in this scene. Well, we could try, but I will say that apparently it's abstract. He made an abstract road. I don't really know how you can do that. I mentally tried to figure out how to do an abstract road. And I feel like if you just do because we saw he did a line. Whatever line he made, isn't that the way the road is going? It can be in any shape. It's a road. It can have any perspective because it can go either way. He made a single line and she's shitting on his abstract road.
That's my abstract road right there.
That's multiple lines. That's fine. But he did one line. We watched what he did. So I'm just saying, I don't know how he achieved an abstract road with his one line that she's like, you're so silly.
I know.
I just felt like that was a little odd, and Blair hates his road, and it makes him feel like shit. So he tries again, and she hates that even more.
Sorry, my cat is meowing. And then she's like, yeah. She's like, no, now I want to talk about scale. And then he fucks that up again. And then he's like, no. So she's like, okay, well, that's okay. Can you just make it a little wider? Okay, can you make it a little longer?
Well, Mrs. Garrett comes in ready to hear the berating with some fresh cookies.
Yeah.
Blair really hates this road. She's got her hand in her hair. She is deeply frustrated. She's shouting at him. She's like, longer, harder, faster, thicker, bolder. All the things that she would shout to him in bed.
Mm-hmm.
She berates him, and then she goes, now what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Who says that to anybody painting? But anyway, she says, now what are you going to do? So confrontationally that he shouts, this, and takes his paintbrush, bangs it into the paint, and then bangs it into the canvas with such
Pushes it
force.
over.
Yeah, Lenny-like force. The prediction, the prophecy is real. Tootie the psychic, Madame Tootie, called this, knocked over the easel, and then Mrs. Garrett's cookies. Frankly, I would have done the same thing. I was so frustrated with Blair. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how you talk to anybody painting. And she should know this because not only is she an artist, but she is the Harvest Queen 3 years running. And one of the things that they teach their Harvest Queens is graciousness.
Well, right. But also, here's the thing is that famous last words, as you said, when, Mrs. Garrett, sort of is like, Blair, you're not a professional. You don't know you don't know what you're doing. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And Blair's like, yeah, I do know what I'm doing. And then it's like, kind of goes into this and is like, doesn't know what she's doing, shouldn't be teaching anyone how to do anything the way that she's doing it.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I believe that this is what the point that I think I was trying to make abstractly, quite like Leo's Road, was that Blair Blair's not, in my opinion, not doing anything wrong. And there's a small opportunity for shit to go wrong. But what is required is that Blair needs to go completely off the rails in an art lesson and berate this guy for not being able to make a line right. And so I feel like if Blair was almost any other human being with writers that were not telling her to fuck it up, she would have the painting lesson would have been great. The point being, like, and this is a bad example, but like if she were to take him on a driving lesson, that's very overwhelming. That's very out of his comfort zone. And that shows that Blair wasn't really thinking. But here, by doing the painting thing, we know very little about Leo, but we know he likes to paint and that he can paint. So this seems like a no-brainer. It seems like a good way to interact with somebody mentally handicapped on paper. But it goes so awry because of Blair's irrational actions that I feel like that makes the story irresponsible, because it should have been something more like, we're going to go for sushi and he eats the wasabi because he doesn't know. Something that is genuinely out of his comfort zone to prove that Blair just wasn't ready for this and she was putting her own thing on it. But she does, in my opinion, choose a sensitive task that would be the right kind of choice.
So,
and it goes so backwards that I'm like, what was your point, writers? Don't
so,
don't interact, don't help. What are you
so,
saying?
so
That's I hopefully I made my point a little clearer this time.
no, I think it's very clear. My problem here, though, is that she, as you said, sort of did all the right things. She chose a sensitive, like she was sensitive in terms of like what she was, having a lesson around, right? It was something that he was familiar with, right?
Yeah.
And then, but she doesn't have the toolkit or the capabilities to teach someone with special needs, because as soon as he starts doing it not the way that she wants him to, she flips out. She gets frustrated and upset, and then directs him in such a way as to make him frustrated and upset, so that he loses it, even doing something as soothing as painting, something that he's good at. So she's just showing the fact that she is incapable of interacting with someone without having outsized expectations, not meeting them where they are at, but trying to get them, pulling them towards her.
Absolutely. And in this scene, that is definitely the case. But prior to that, she's taking him to movies and going on long walks with him, not trying to avoid conversations with him. And then immediately after this, she's learned her lesson instantly. And she's like, like, we'll get to it, but basically, however you see it is fine by me.
Yeah.
So it's just this weird blip. It's like, maybe that's the lesson, is like, if you're going to be dealing with mentally handicapped people. Don't be a Blair. Or don't be a Blair in this moment.
Well, right, which I think, is a, a very important. I think, first of all, as I said before, this is a congratulations, you made this about you.
Yeah.
Where they use the issue of special needs people and how to reach them and be friends with them and be, help to enhance their painting skills, right? But the way that Blair approached this was literally to scream and yell at him until he was overwhelmed doing the thing that he is actually good at. So yeah, don't be a Blair. Like, be a Blair and be like, hey, I want to hang out with Leo. He's hot.
But that's why I feel like it's kind of an irresponsible message, because it's like, be a Blair, be a Blair, be a Blair. Don't be a Blair. Be a Blair.
But no, the don't be a Blair starts almost immediately. As soon as she comes back from the movie
and
theater
says he laughs at all
and
right
says
spots.
He laughed in all the right places. He's very perceptive. We knew immediately where this was going.
Fair enough. Well, where is Leo going? Mrs. Garrett asks, and he bursts into tears and says, home.
I'm going home.
I do not know how he didn't get nominated for an Emmy. And as Mrs. Garrett picks up the cookies from the floor, she drops some hard truth.
Yeah.
Blair's pushing him too hard. She wants to know what Blair wants from him. And honestly, I think a lot of people do. They debate whether or not Blair's trying to help or change him. Can it be both? He likes looking at pretty pictures, just like everyone does.
Yeah.
Blair thinks Mrs. Garrett is saying that what she's doing is hopeless, and Mrs. Garrett is like, no shit. What you're doing is hopeless, you idiot.
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Garrett says that she should scrub.
Well, so this was a combination of two things that I hate the most. Mrs. Garrett being breathy and condescending, and Blair being obtuse and knowing full well that she was being bad, but not acting like she knew it. She was like, Mrs. Garrett, why are you treating me like this? Like, what do you mean? Why are you saying this? Why are you being so mean to me? I didn't want anything from him. And Mrs. Garrett's like, why are you, and she's like, why are you doing this, Mrs. Garrett? Why are you trying to make me feel bad?
Mrs. Garrett says she should strive to make sure that he's the best that he can be.
Yeah. And then this is Mrs. Garrett's, like, her most, as I said, breathy, vocal fry condescension. It's like, of course you want him to be the best he can be. But also accept him for what he already is. Warm, sensitive, creative. Retarded. I almost lost my mind.
That's the scene I saw. That was the scene that I just flipped over, and I was like, which episode are we watching today? And then I was like, that one.
Honest to God, if someone if a sworn enemy of mine or something, like, does a smash cut of just me saying that over and over again, I'm will have to kill myself and go, like, live under a rock. But, like, it's so appalling that they're using the hard R to be like, he's these things, but also you need to know that he's this. It's like, I was shocked.
It's that's the firm memory of this episode that's always in my head. I'm shocked that we have another scene.
I know.
And
what is it? And here's the thing. What happens? We open on my favorite goddamn fucking person, Roy.
In your favorite place.
The cafeteria.
Yeah,
we're
Roy
in there.
In the cafeteria.
Joe's working. In comes Roy. Salutations, Josie, my posy. Roy is literally like the milady. guy of like 2010 hipsters. Like, let me get the door for you, milady. Let me get your
100%.
chair
He's
for
the
you,
82 version of
milady.
that. He's the
Ugh.
prototype. Roy asks Joe to say hi to the nicest guy in peak skill, so she pushes his clipboard into his belly and says hi to a sheepish Leo.
Yeah.
Roy will masturbate to that memory for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Blair and Leo see each other, and it's incredibly awkward, mostly because they're aware of the episode we all had to watch.
Yeah, and then Mrs.
Um,
Garrett comes in and is like, kind of like trying to run like defense here, and is sort of like, hey, like Roy, because you're actually mentally deficient in many ways, and you can't get out of the way in all of the ways. I need you to come in to the kitchen with me. Can I please just have you come with me to get you out of the way because I need to discuss something and
that
have
would be
those.
great if she said that, but she doesn't say that. She goes, she starts with a conversation in the middle of the room rather than being like, let's go in there and talk about an order. She starts by placing the order in the middle of the room, saying she needs something a little more healthy for next week. Can't even
Less
be like,
sugar.
I want to talk about the bread order. Just something that forces him to be like, oh, it's like a birthday cake with bean sprouts in it, which she's like, sure, that sounds fine. Yes. And also, like, does the writers believe that Mrs. Garrett's regular order has birthday cakes in it? Like, I get birthday cakes weekly because there's a lot of girls. You never know. We have birthday every day. Every day at 3:00, it's somebody's birthday, and if it's not, we just make it one of the pets' birthdays. We don't give a fuck. Birthday cake every day for these girls.
It's the laziest, worst joke. Literally, it's like you could have like that. Did they just leave in like a placeholder?
It felt like it. It really
Like
felt like
they're
it.
like I could think of an alt now. It's like anything is better than that.
Yeah, yeah. The baguettes are too baguette.
Yeah.
I don't know. So the whole thing's a ruse to get Blair and Leo alone. She takes Roy into the kitchen to further discuss the bean sprout birthday cake. Asks Joe to carry the 2 pastry boxes because Roy and Mrs. Garrett couldn't possibly handle one each. Joe gets it, but she looks annoyed that she has to go along with it. And then Roy follows behind Joe like he's about to grind up against her butt until
And
she's.
she says, no tailgating.
He does some really weird fast-footed shuffling to get around her to get the door for her, which made me think that there's a reason the actor that plays Roy still works today. He didn't write those lines. Can't be mad at him.
Okay.
I enjoyed the shuffle, but I also wrote here in all caps. Does anybody even want to see the resolution of this plot?
No. Anyway, so then Blair and Leo make up. He's like, oh, hi, I didn't notice you there, even though he's been staring at her for the full scene. And she's like, hey,
Well,
how's
he
it
asks if
going?
she's mad about him about the painting debacle, and
Yeah.
she says she could never be mad at him.
And he's like, oh, okay, cool. That sounds awesome. And then they talk about painting,
He
and
says
she's
he'd
like,
like to paint something else for her, and she'd like that.
yeah. And he's like, well, I'm going to paint the view from my window.
It's got trees and pretty flowers and 0 roads. There's no roads. You
No
can't
roads.
see a road.
Because here's the thing, roads are triggering for Blair. If you get the road wrong, Blair's going to have a meltdown.
Also, he says he's going to paint her something, and then she says she'd like that, and he says, what would you like me to draw? I thought it was painting. I'm just saying.
Anyway,
You should know the difference between the two.
so then
And
he's like, how do you want me to paint it? And she's like,
he cautiously goes, but how do you want it to look?
yeah.
Like,
And she says,
you're going to hate it again.
yeah, how you see it, just exactly as you see it. And then he pumps his fist, and that's the freeze frame out.
Yeah. He was really worried that she's a stickler for perspective, but when she said she's over her perspective fetish, he was like, yes.
This was so horrible.
I'm sorry.
No, of course I enjoyed it because it was unbearably offensive and horrible to just keep hearing these people being like, you should treat the mentally challenged as normal people and be friends with them, and have them constantly saying retard over and over again. Like, it's just, it's almost 40 years from when this was on TV, shows how far we've come, that just hearing that is so jarring, to just constantly be hearing that word over and over again, well-meaning as it might be. it's just like still, it has a lot of shock value.
Yes.
You know, it would be sort of as though, like, you know, someone just kept referring to, you know, Tootie as a negress. We'd be like, Jesus Christ, what is happening? You know, it's just, it has this, like, thank God, like, because words do carry meaning, and thank God we've gotten to this point, you know?
For sure. I'm overwhelmed from this podcast. I actually decided to have a meal before it and take a nap because I just knew. I don't normally even take naps, and I usually don't eat until dinner time. But I was like, I need energy because holy crap, this episode, man. Well, I'm glad that I got to share it with you. I honestly wished I could have been sitting on your couch watching you watch it.
Honestly, like, here, as I said, probably at least 3 times when I was watching it, I exclaimed out loud. And because I was listening to it through earbuds, so it was silent, my husband called out from upstairs saying, "Oh my God, are you okay? What's going on?"
You weren't
and I was
okay.
Like, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just watching Facts of Life. This is a crazy one. This is crazy. So.
It is a crazy one. Next week we will be back. It is a Natalie episode. It's a continuation of Natalie's search for her birth mother.
God.
So that'll be exciting for you. I know that you love a Natalie one. All right. Well, until then, thank you very much for tuning in. This was a bit of a long one. I think it needed to be. There was a lot to break down, a lot of Masters and Johnson discussion, and we appreciate you sticking around with us and not canceling us.
And also, happy Halloween.
There's no way that they're going to see this on Halloween.
I'm just saying it before, just to get it in the can.
Okay, but Halloween will have been about a month ago by the time this airs.
Sorry, time means nothing.
That is true. So happy time means nothing. All right. Bye-bye. Until then.
Bye.
Bye.